Welcome, Pam. Thanks for coming.
As we were sharing, I was sharing with you before we started what an honor it is to be here. I have long admired and respected this conference. So when I was asked to speak, I was blown away and said yes immediately. So, and of course, to speak on one of my favorite literacy topics, maybe some might say a current obsession of mine, hoping to make it an obsession of yours as well. Spelling. And I heard Susan Lambert gave a shout out to myself, which was very kind, but also to spelling. So as visible language, and that's what we'll focus on in this session. There is a Padlet because we have a brief amount of time together, an hour and 15 minutes, to dive into a really important literacy topic. So I've curated some resources on a Padlet for you that you can check out later as well. And also it's an interactive webinar as well. So Rachel and Beth have kindly offered to be monitoring the chat. So let's get started. Here we go. This is the Padlet. We did have access to this earlier, but there is a QR code right there in front of you. I think we all know what to do. Just take that camera of yours on your phone, open it up, and point it towards that QR code. And the password for this Padlet is very tricky. It's spelling. So there'll be lots of resources on there for you related to this presentation and, as I said, beyond. So I'll wait just about maybe 15, 20 seconds for that. One of my dear friends, I'm honored to say, is Anita Archer. So I will say that this presentation is going to have a perky pace because we have lots to cover. I think we're good. Okay. And there's the Padlet that has lots and lots of resources on it for you. There's some seminal readings around spelling from the one and only Dr. Louisa Moats, who is the person who coined the term spelling as visible language, which is the focus of this session. In addition, I am well known, I think, for my Padlets and my Wakelets, so you'll find one specifically for spelling on the Padlet, as well as my comprehensive Wakelet that has like 43 Wakelets on one spot. And I have recently done two national podcasts on spelling with The Measured Mom and Melissa and Lori, and those are on there too. So if you're interested in listening more about spelling, those are some choices. Right. And of course, want to give a shout out to two of my colleagues originally that supported this development of this training, Erin Amy and Dr. Tamara Eisenberg from Pennsylvania. So here we go. All right, so some of the things today I'm going to share with you definitely are going to affirm knowledge that you already have. So that's always good. I'm certainly hoping that something I share with you today will help you wonder and think, because it's in that area of cognitive dissonance where we're learning. And then, there's a common term that's been discussed around the science of reading. It's know better, do better. And that's my strong belief. It's my simple view, knowledge times practice, that we must deepen our knowledge around the science of literacy. But then we must translate that into practice, because knowledge alone is not enough. It's certainly like building a strong foundation to a house. But if we don't do something with that knowledge, in our classrooms, it doesn't make a difference for kids. And that's why we all get up in the morning. So know better, do better. There we go. And that's what this is about. All right, so I've often heard this, and I bet you have too, that reading and spelling are two sides of the same coin. And just in the chat, I'm going to ask Beth and Rachel to tell me, like, do you agree with that statement? It's almost like a thumbs up, thumbs sideways, or thumbs down. Do you agree with that statement or disagree? So just in the chat, that's how we're going to do a little warm up here. All right. And we'll just do that with a perky pace on your end too. And yet lots of thumbs up.
Yep.
Yeah, if you were with me, usually that's what I see. I see lots of thumbs up, and certainly reading and spelling do share a lot of the same linguistic properties. And so I'm going to watch Rachel and Beth as I do this next activity because I'm assuming you'll be speaking these in the same fashion. So if reading and spelling are two sides of the same coin, let's test that hypothesis a little bit. Okay, ready? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you 4 words and I'm going to ask you to read them. The moment I hear you read them, that means they're a sight word. Remember that a sight word is any word that we recognize instantaneously and effortlessly. Then I'm going to go to the next one. All right, we're going to see how you do. Now you're going to give yourself a score when we're done with this. Like, did you read 1 out of 4, 2 out of 4, 3 out of 4, or 4 out of 4 automatically? So are you ready? Here we go.
Accommodate. Fuchsia.
Yeah.
Narcissistic. Go ahead, Rachel.
Onomatopoeia.
Okay, so if reading and spelling are two sides of the same coin, you will have the same score in spelling as you do in reading. So let's see how you did with the reading. How did you do? Let's see. You're going to tell me how you did. How did you do? How did everyone? Did you all read those as if they were by sight?
I see a 4 out of 4.
4 out of 4. Most people 4 out of 4s? Anyone out there not? All automatically
All 4s.
read. Okay, congratulations. So if reading and spelling are the same side of the coin, spelling them, you'll also have a 4. So let's test that out. You can grab a piece of paper, a pen, your phone, whatever you have. Here we go. Ready? Our first word was accommodate. Say the word with me, everyone. Accommodate. At my house, I have a sign that says, I can at Nana's because I always accommodate my 6 grandchildren. What word, everyone? Say it with me. Accommodate. Now pick up your pen, pencil, or phone and spell the word accommodate. All right, I will look for eyes coming up to see. Looks like you're ready. The next word was fuchsia. What word, everyone? Say it with me. Fuchsia. Fuchsia is a beautiful color. What word? Fuchsia. Pick up your pen or pencil or phone and spell fuchsia. Right, our next word was narcissistic. I'm even going to help you out a little bit more. Let's clap it out. Let's do the syllables. Ready? Narcissistic. To be narcissistic is not an enviable trait. What word? Everyone say it with me. Narcissistic. And usually if you were with me in the room, I'd hear a lot of I hear a lot of sounding out. But there you go. Okay, last but not least, the biggie. Onomatopoeia. Ready? Say it with me. Onomatopoeia. I see some of you even clapping it out. Good for you. Excuse me. Onomatopoeia is a literary device. What word, everyone? Onomatopoeia. Now, if you were with me, we'd be in the room and we'd be doing a little drum roll. Because now we're going to see how we did, right? So I'm sure when I ask Rachel and Beth, they're all going to say, oh, they got all 4s, right? Because they're two sides of the same coin. All right, so check your work. Here's the first word, accommodate. And now, fuchsia. This is usually where I start to hear groans. All right. And thank you some of you for having your camera on if you can, because I'm loving seeing your faces. Narcissistic. And onomatopoeia. Okay, so in the chat, if you're comfortable, Place like your ratio, like 4 out of 4, 3 out of 4. Just share how you did, because we all had 4 out of 4s with the reading, right? How we doing out there, Beth and Rachel?
It's not good.
That's what
Oh.
I got 1 out of 4 also, but that's what we're
Yeah,
seeing.
I'm not seeing anyone with more than 2 so far. Oh, there's a 3. Diana got 3.
There
Wow.
you go, Diana.
Star speller.
There you go. Okay, so again, in the chat, just briefly, because we're short on time, but we had a 4 out of 4 when we were reading these words, and we agreed at that point that reading and spelling were 2 sides of the same coin. But we're seeing that with the spelling, our automatic recall was not as strong when we had to spell these words. Why do you think that is? Just curious. Quickly put some thoughts in the chat.
Yeah, so people are saying spelling patterns. I said blame the schwa because that's I'm going to blame it on. Somebody said I've never written those words before, and somebody else said the dreaded schwa.
Mhm.
I have more practice reading than writing them. I am those words are more widely read than used in my written language. So
Great responses.
mhm.
Yeah, all of those accurate.
Recognition is easier than production.
Ah, ding, 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 ding. We have a winner. Yeah. So let's look what the research says, right? About, because we saw how we did, right? So probably you're adjusting your hypothesis a little bit, that reading and spelling are 2 sides of the same coin. And yes, I'm not saying that they do not share linguistic relationships. They absolutely do. But what you're finding, right, that recall, when you see these words in print, you can sample a little bit. You don't have to pay attention to the exact sequence of orthography and the morphemes and think about the phonemes as deeply as you need to when you're spelling, right? So this is what I want. You know how you've ever gotten a song like stuck in your, like that earworm, and the song is just stuck in your head. This is what I want you to have as an earworm from this presentation. When you're teaching spelling, you are teaching reading. Say that with me. When you're teaching spelling, you are teaching reading. Because if you can spell a word, you can read it. But I think what you're finding out is just because you can read a word doesn't necessarily mean that you can spell it. And for the most part, I have had the honor of, working in schools in Pennsylvania, but also across the country. Many schools have looked at handwriting and spelling as we don't need to do those things anymore. They're not 21st century skills, right? And they're neglecting this very important linguistic opportunity to teach kids to read and spell, right? So when you're teaching spelling, you are teaching reading. When we marry decoding reading and encoding spelling, we benefit both. Right? So when you're teaching reading or spelling, you are teaching reading, right? It's a little mantra here. So why was that difficult? All right. So we're going to read this one together where you are, right? We're going to start right here with spelling. It's going to be a choral reading. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Spelling requires complete and accurate word memories. Reading words in contrast is possible, even if word memories are not fully specified. So for those words that you could read but not spell, you don't yet have fully specified memories. You have not orthographically mapped them in a way that you've stored them for complete and accurate recall, right? And just as folks have said, you probably didn't have as much experience spelling them. You may have had experience reading them, but not spelling them. And so they're not encoded in your memory to recall and reproduce, right? So when we're thinking about this remembering of words. I always call this almost the Holy Trinity, right? We're talking about a bonding between orthography, phonology, and meaning, right? So this is the orthographic mapping process. How do we remember and store words? We look at the letter sequence, the orthography, the written spelling form of the word, and then immediately we're mapping it, starting right back here in that occipital lobe in the visual word form area, and immediately we're attaching it to phonemes, right? So the orthography to the phonology, but here's what I don't want you to forget. Then we have to bond it to meaning. Orthographic mapping is a process of bonding, making connections between spelling, pronunciation, and meaning, right? So if you were with me, I'd have you all standing up and we'd be doing this. Orthography, phonology, meaning. We'd be making this triangle together. So take out your pointer finger and let's just do it. Ready? Orthography, phonology, meaning. One more time. Orthography, phonology, and meaning. I've often thought too, if I could get it through TSA, bringing a three-legged stool with me, and I do when I can travel with one. And let's think about a three-legged stool, and the stool is standing up, and the legs represent orthography, phonology, and meaning. What happens if we pull out any one of those legs? And then Rachel, or Beth, I guess you can answer that.
You'd fall.
You'd fall, right. So it's a mapping between these three language systems. And so if we can think of another mantra for this presentation, it would be integrate, don't isolate. Say it with me. Integrate, don't isolate. We tend to be focusing sometimes in particular areas. Something becomes hot in our field, and everyone runs to that particular language system. And there's a hyper focus on that area. And then there's a misunderstanding that this is not an interdependent system, that each of these language systems is contributing independently, but also interdependently, right? So even in some of the high frequency word spellings, some heart word routines neglect meaning. They bond the spelling and they bond the phonology, but they don't embed the what? The meaning. So if you want to own a word, right? If you want that word, you want to have a high quality lexical representation, thinking of Perfetti's work, you must bond minimally these three language systems: orthography, phonology, and meaning. All right. So just kind of ground us where we need to be around language, right? Because we have a short amount of time together. These are the 5 areas that we'll focus on for our learning intentions. We're really going to have like a 30,000-foot view of spelling. And then we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of looking at spelling errors and analysis to inform our instruction and intervention. Okay. So again, 30,000-foot view and then down to the nitty-gritty. So these are the 5 areas. And we're going to do that through a spelling inventory in terms of the nitty-gritty work. When we get into the spelling inventory, what I'm going to be modeling for you is what I want you to do at your school. You may already be doing this, but if you're not, this is what you should do when you go back so that you can use spelling inventories to their most advantageous support for kids. All right. All right. So let's just do a little bit of the what, why, and how. Again, you're going to read this with me. Here we go. Spelling, the translation of words from speech to print, requires integrating information about several language systems and the way they are represented in English orthography. So again, you're looking at this integration of language. This is another amazing researcher in spelling, Suzanne Carricker. All right, so that's look how Suzanne Carricker represents this in a chapter she wrote for multisensory basic language skills, right? So we have a morphophonemic language, and it's represented by both meaning and by phonemes, by sounds, right? And examples of this are very prevalent in the spellings that end in ed. So let's say jump together. Ready? Say jumped, jump. Let's tap sounds together. Ready? J, p, t. Good job. How many phonemes do we hear? We hear 5 phonemes. Jump is a verb. and verbs have tenses. And in this case, the tense is what, everyone? It's past tense. How do we know that, Rachel or Beth? How do we know this is a past tense verb?
Because we hear that at the end.
That's right. And we have a spelling that is what?
ED.
ED, that's
sorry.
correct. Morphemes have stable spellings, right? So that's why it's so important to be teaching morphology from the beginning. But their pronunciation can shift because we have a phonemic language. We spell by meaning and by sound, right? So we have meaningful units. We have the base word jump. If I was with you, we'd all be jumping right now. And then we have the suffix that sounds t, right? The t is representing, as Beth said, a past tense, right? And we're spelling the t sound with an ed in this case. Why is that? Before I knew better, and I think that's why it's so important for teacher knowledge. We cannot teach what we don't know. I never understood why jumped was jumped and bugged was bugged and landed was id. I was like, I don't know. This English language is crazy. Well, it turns out English is not crazy. It's very logical and it's phonemic. The morphemes maintain their spelling, but the pronunciation changes based on the phonemes. So together, if you were with me, we'd say jump with me, jump. Our ending phoneme is p. Put your hand right here. Is that a voice sound or an unvoiced sound? An unvoiced sound, your voice box is not on. Now say jump, and the t sound, voiced or unvoiced? Oh, so if the base word ends in an unvoiced phoneme, I'll pronounce my ed how? With the t, an unvoiced sound. So there's alignment. It's logical. What if my grandkids, and they do, they bugged each other when they were here for Thanksgiving. Our base word in bugged is what? Bug. Ending sound, g. Voiced or unvoiced, everyone? Voiced, right? And bugged. D. Ah, so again, it's logical. If the base word ends in a voiced phoneme, we'll pronounce that ed with a voiced phoneme as well, the d. And if it ends in a t or a d, we're going to get that extra syllable there, but landed and wanted, right? So English is logical. It makes sense, but as teachers, we have to know our own language. And these examples are great examples to show us how our language is morphophonemic. The phonemes influence the pronunciation of how we'll pronounce these ending morphemes, right? But the morphemes are always stable spellings. So it's so important for kids to know if I'm spelling a word and it's going to be happening in the past, I'm going to always spell it with an ed, right? Because they know that's the morpheme they need to add to the word to show its meaning, but it will be pronounced differently. Right? So morphophonemic. So I already gave you this answer. It's morphophonemic, right? So you can look, once you have deep knowledge of language and our language systems, you'll be able to look at any misspelling of a word and you'll go like, ah, that's why it's spelled that way. It's a pretty cool skill to have, right? Because our spelling is based on 5 principles. Sound symbol correspondences, mapping phonemes to graphemes and graphemes to phonemes, right? Phonemes being the speech sounds in our English, the individual speech sounds, and graphemes being the letter or the groups of letters represent those phonemes. Orthographic conventions that were put in place, sometimes by monks. The position in a word, where the phoneme falls within the word will often determine how it's going to be spelled. English isn't crazy. Of course, meaning, which we just looked at. And then we have adopted in English from many other languages. We have a really rich, robust language, and we're borrowers. So oftentimes spellings will be spelled a certain way based on the language of origin, right? So those are the 5, the big 5, kind of like the other big 5, right? So in English, we have a very deep orthography, not a shallow one, meaning it doesn't have a typical one-to-one correspondence. that we have phonemes that can be spelled with multiple graphemes. And you're seeing on the screen some examples here, right? Especially when we get to our vowels and especially our long vowels. We have lots of ways we can spell those phonemes with different graphemes. Depending on the position of a word, where it falls, determines often how we will spell the word. So if I was going to boil toys before my grandkids came, I don't think I'd ever do that. But my diphthong, oi, right? So boil, right, has the diphthong oi in the middle of the word. How am I going to spell the oi diphthong? With an OI. I would do the same thing if it was at the beginning of a word. But the toy, the diphthong will be spelled with an OY. It's the end of the word. So depending on the position at times of the phoneme will determine the grapheme that's selected. So position matters. And there were, of course, when we moved from speech to print, there were some decisions made around syllable types and also conventions to move from speech to print that influence how we spell. Morphology. Remember what I said, morphemes have stable spellings, but their pronunciation can change. And especially if I have teachers here that work in the upper grades, third, fourth, fifth, middle school, high school. Again, we must start morphology in kindergarten, but it becomes even more so important as we go up in the grade levels because we have multisyllabic words with lots of morphemes. And we want to uncover simultaneously the decoding and the meaning, right? So an example here is duct or duct, which means to lead, but it can be pronounced differently, just like our jumped can and our bugged and our landed. Induction, education, and deductive, but all have to do with leading, but pronunciation changes. And then, of course, the language of origin matters as well. Oftentimes, where did the word come from? For example, we might use the short, spell the short I spelling with a Y if the word has a Greek origin. In the word photo, we would expect a kindergartner perhaps would spell it with an F, right? But we know it has a Greek origin, so that sound is going to be spelled with a PH, right? So English makes sense. It isn't crazy, it's logical, but as teachers, we have to know our own language, right? So it's on this continuum, right, of predictability. All words are mapped the same way. We don't have a special place in our brain or the visual word form area for a word like of and a word like mop. They're all orthographically mapped the same way, where we map the sequence of letters to the pronunciation and to the meaning. Remember back to our little exercise where we're bonding orthography, phonology, and meaning. Unfortunately, a lot of our early words that kids are learning are our oldest language system, the Anglo-Saxon, and they often have the most changes in how they're pronounced over time. But no words should be in jail. No words should be trick words or red words or I was in a classroom once for their words in a doghouse. All words are mapped the same way, right? And we want kids to be looking at the sequence of the letters, mapping them to sounds and bonding them to meaning. All right. So why teach spelling? As you saw, even at the beginning, there's a strong correlation between reading and spelling, right? They rely on the same language systems. And when you're teaching spelling, you're teaching reading. One of the things that's most precious for us as teachers is time. So why not be efficient with our time? One thing I want to, share and caution you is oftentimes when we're doing a phonics lesson, we have a scope and sequence, and towards the bottom of that lesson or towards the end of that lesson sequence, there is the practice. There's the application of decodable text and dictation. And sometimes what happens is, we run out of time, right? And so what gets skipped is the practice of decodable text and the spelling or the sentence writing or the writing. You cannot skip that. That is where you're going to see as students have learned what you have taught, that relationship with reading and spelling, right? And just as I've been trying to share with you, one of the goals of teaching reading and spelling together, decoding and encoding, is to show kids that our language is logical. It makes sense. It is reliable, right? Also, we know that spelling is visible language. Poor spellers are often poor readers. It's a signal to us that we're going to have challenges in reading as well, right? And when we're teaching spelling, we are teaching reading. It improves reading. And as here it has to be taught, not caught. Sometimes I'm finding that spelling is still being taught the same way it was when I went to school, and that was a long time ago for spelling. Monday, we get a list of words, maybe 10 or a number of words. Oftentimes those words have no patterns. They might be words around Halloween or Thanksgiving or a theme, but they have no systematic focus on phonics instruction. It goes from least complex to most complex. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we might do rainbow writing. We take them home. Mom and dad might quiz us on us. We write them a lot of times. We take a test on Friday, and then on Saturday, we do what? Put in the chat what happens on Saturday with those words if we teach it. I want to say in quotes here, teach it that way.
Pretty much everyone's saying forget them, forget them, forget.
Forget them, right? And what we want is we want kids to be able to store these words accurately and automatically, right? Because not only is spelling influencing, these dictations, it's influencing the quantity and the quality of writing. If a student has in their oral language the word enormous, right? And they're writing a story, but they do not know how to spell enormous. What they're going to do is they're going to substitute a word like big. And they're not going to be demonstrating the language that they are capable of because spelling is a barrier. So the quantity and the quality of writing. So we're not just talking about the influence of spelling for reading, also for writing. Spelling will influence the writing quality and quantity. Another reason for you to teach spelling, okay? All right, so that was kind of the five principles is pretty much the what, right? And then you're seeing these language systems again, and then the how. So how do we teach it? We teach it through structured literacy, right? So we're teaching all the language systems. As you can see, this is an earlier graphic for structured literacy from the International Dyslexia Association. And what I want you to notice in the circle on the left is this integration, this overlapping of language skills all together, right? Phonology, the speech sounds, the connection to sound and symbol and syllable types that we talked about in the five principles, the morphemes, the meaningful units within words, the syntax, how the word is used in context and grammar. And then, of course, what does the word mean? We're teaching all of that. We're not doing a little bit of phonemic awareness over here, and then some phonics over there, and maybe later on we're teaching morphology separately. We integrate, don't isolate. Say that again with me again, and put your fingers together just like this. Integrate, don't isolate. They're integrated. We're expecting kids to make connections between these language systems, right? And we're not aligning them. We're not warming kids up with phonemes that we're going to ask them to spell and words to spell, and then talking about their morphemes and their part of speech and putting them in sentences. We are isolating these things, phonics patching them, phonemic awareness patching them. We have to integrate, not isolate. And that's really what that wheel is trying to represent, right? And then how do we do that? Systematically, which means going from least complex to most complex. That there's a scope and sequence that begins with the least complex spelling patterns and then goes to the most complex and begins with the most frequent way we would spell this phoneme with a grapheme and then least frequently, right? It's also cumulative. We don't teach it and then move on. We have to go back and distribute practice for students so they retain these words, right? My friend Anita Archer says there's a big practice gap in our nation. Even when we're teaching it explicitly, we're not providing the practice, the distributed, interleaved, cumulative practice to maintain these skills. And we're teaching it explicitly, not implicitly, right? Just as words come up, and diagnostically. And this is where we're going to focus quite a bit, in the second part of this session is diagnostically, right? And then as you can see in this wheel at the end, they're all integrated, right? The what and the how, right? The know and the do, right? And this is the more recent graphic of structured literacy from the International Dyslexia Association. And you can see, just as the focus of this conference is on response to instruction intervention, multi-tiered system of support, you'll see that at the top, right? And then you see the what, you see the language systems on the left, and you see the how we're teaching it explicitly, diagnostically, multimodally, scaffolded, highly interactive, right? And then the why. So this is another graphic. So these graphics are tools for you to focus on when you think about your instruction, right? So recently, the amazing Dr. Louise Bear-Swirling had an edited book that she edited around structured literacy and focused on specific areas. And the chapter on spelling was done by Louisa Moats. And so how should we be teaching spelling? This is how we should be teaching spelling. And what I want you to notice on the screen is what you're seeing is language. Language is literacy. Literacy is language, right? So you're seeing phonemes, phonology, syllable types. What I want you to notice in this presentation is alignment, cohesiveness, right? Between what the research is saying and what the practice is recommending as well. That we're teaching language, phonemes, syllables, morphemes, phonics, word identification, right? We're explaining these things. We're not implicitly just hoping they get it. We're giving lots of what? And you're also going to notice two words here, practice, practice. Lots of guided practice and word lists and feedback, immediate corrective feedback. What you're really seeing here are the tenets and principles of direct instruction, right? Direct, explicit instruction, which has the highest outcomes, especially when you're a novice learner or a struggling learner. Explicit instruction is absolutely essential, right? And then we, of course, test and then provide corrective feedback and we reteach. We don't move on, right? So these are the 6 steps from that wonderful book, all right? You need a scope and sequence. Sometimes when I visit schools, I'll say, what is your phonics scope and sequence or your spelling scope and sequence? And they'll say, we don't have one, right? So there is no one universal scope and sequence that came down from the mountain on tablets. However, if you look to the research, what you'll see is it follows the tenets and principles of explicit instruction. Least complex to most frequent to least frequent, right? And so this is just an example that comes from the amazing Joan Sedida's Keys to Literacy, right? So this is what you want to look for if you don't have a scope and sequence. Least complex to most frequent spelling to least frequent spelling, and very explicit teaching and practice of these skills. All right. All right. So here we're moving into the second part where we're really I've been trying to be your cheerleader for spelling, for teaching it and teaching it in a structured literacy manner. But also now I'm going to strongly advocate that if you are not yet using a spelling inventory at least 3 times a year, universally for all students, that you consider that. There are a number of spelling inventories. The one I'm going to share with you briefly is the letters spelling inventory, and I'll share some others as well. But at least 3 times a year when you do your other universal screening, you should be doing a spelling inventory. It's going to give you visible language in front of you to inform your instruction, your intervention, in addition to the other data sources that you have. So what I'm doing now is what I want you to do when you go back to your school if you're not already doing it. All right. So what are the advantages of doing a spelling inventory rather than waiting for kids to just spell these words, randomly? Of course, it's going to be efficient with your time, but the spelling inventories, all of them follow a scope and sequence from least complex to most complex, right? They follow a phonics scope and sequence, and they're very brief. They take about maybe 10 minutes to do, and they're done whole group. It doesn't take a lot of time, so it's worthy of your time. Where they do take time and very valuable time is in the analysis. And it's very, very valuable professional learning and will inform your instruction intervention, whole group and small group. All right. So these are some spelling screeners that you could select from. You'll notice a little asterisk next to the words their way developmental spelling inventory. I do recommend the spelling inventory itself, but the program itself is not explicit enough and systematic enough. But the inventory, yes. The letters one, Acadians has a spelling inventory. PALS, there are norm reference, CBM measures as well, right? So you have options, is what I'm saying. Again, you see this scope and sequence, they follow pretty much a scope and sequence similar to this. All right? From short vowel CVCs all the way down to those multisyllabic words. And you may, depending on your grade level, stop at a certain point, right? Because your kids haven't gotten there yet. But you'll notice that that's typically how they go, right? Right. And those errors, mistakes are valuable information to you, especially when you start looking for patterns across your school, your grade level, your classroom, and then individual students. They're going to kind of give you a view of what's happening around language in your classrooms. All right. All right, so here's what you have to do. It's not hard. You just put the kids in seats so they can't copy from each other. Maybe little folders. You're going to have numbered paper. You're going to give them a pen or a pencil without an eraser. Right? You want that first attempt and not holes in the paper. Pretty much like what I did with you. I say the word, they say the word, you want the word in their mouth. You want to confirm that they've heard it correctly, that they have a phonological representation of that word, right? They repeat the word and then you're just quiet. Important here not to overemphasize any phonemes because you'll likely create the dreaded schwa. If you say cat, guess what your kids are going to say? They're going to say cat, and they're going to spell cat, C-A-T-U. And then you're going to say, why are my kids spelling cat, C-A-T-U? Sometimes when I visit classrooms, I'll say, how are you saying cat? And they'll say cat. And I'm like, oh. Spoken language and written language are both expressive forms of language. So what comes out your mouth is going to come out your pencil, right? So we have to be careful as teachers to be very aware of pronouncing our phonemes correctly. Okay. All right. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to be looking at these two students and some other students for like the next half hour. And we're going to start out with the big view. We're just going to look at two students, and I'm only giving you, because we don't have a lot of time, and I'm going to put my timer on my phone, 30 seconds. You're only going to have 30 seconds to look at both of them. You're going to decide who you think the better reader is in 30 seconds. And you're just going to think about strengths and weaknesses. You don't have a lot of time. You're going to be able to do this. All right. I have faith in you. Let me get my clock on my phone so we can do this. All right. Are you ready? Here it comes. And then, of course, we got to go with spelling. Yeah. You got to go with Louise and Modes first. Okay. And then you're going to put in the chat. Okay. Here we go. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Go. 30 seconds. Who's the better reader? Can you see some strengths and weaknesses? And you just put student 1 strength or weakness or student 2 strength weakness. 30 seconds. But we're going to start out with who's the better reader. You have 15 seconds left. All right, in the chat first. Who do you think is a better reader in second grade? At the beginning of second grade, in the chat. Everybody just put in a 1 or a 2. And then Beth or
Lots
Rachel.
of ones so far. Sorry.
See any twos in there?
I haven't seen any, not yet,
Nope.
Okay.
but we don't
All
want to
right.
say they're answering.
No, no, it's okay. Yeah. So, is it, I guess my question to you is, right? Do we see inter-rater reliability at this point? Yes or no? Right.
Yes.
So would it be valuable to have a tool like this, an assessment tool that at a quick glance, now I'm not saying this is the only measure you're looking at. We always look at multiple data points. However, would this be a valuable tool to add to your assessment tool bank if you don't have it yet, to kind of get a gist about where kids are with reading and spelling? Yes or no? Put it in the chat. Have I sold you yet on spelling inventories?
I think so.
It's more to come. All right, so just quickly, any strength or weakness you see from student one or student two, just put it in the chat. Again, I'm only going to give you 30 seconds because we don't have a lot of time together. So, and then you guys could just tell me what you see. So anything you saw, big picture. This is where we're starting, big picture.
Somebody saw reversing some letters,
Yep, student two.
digraphs for student 2,
Uh-huh.
student
Lens and
2.
diagrams. Omissions for student 2.
Is spelling visible language?
Mhm.
Are you seeing right smack dab in front of you what you should be doing for instruction? And we're only really at the 30,000 foot view. So would it be valuable to take the spelling inventory results from a classroom and or a grade level, spread them out and start looking for patterns? Would that be valuable professional learning and discussion with your colleagues, yes or no? And we're just at the beginning, right? So, we're looking for patterns. Right. So in a school that I was working with, I'll tell you a story later. We were laying out all of second grade, and boy, I mean, it's from this school. Did we see some patterns, right, that were informing what we did next? All right. So that's 30,000 foot view. Right now, remember, what did I tell you the Holy Trinity was? Orthography, phonology, and meaning. So how would we analyze these if we're going to go from, think about this like as a funnel, from the, this big part of the funnel, and we're going to narrow down. Well, of course, we'd analyze them through language. And we wouldn't be, we wouldn't be like, which ones should we do? No, phonology, orthography, and morphology, right? So the awareness of sounds and the structure of spoken words in phonology, that's how we'll look at them. We'll look at them through orthography, how we represent those phonemes in print, and then morphology, their meaningful parts. All right, so now we're going to go deeper. Same ones, right? These are the 5 questions that are going to guide the analysis. First 2 for phonology, the next 2 for phonics or orthography, and then the final for morphology. All right. And we're going to have a perky pace. So get ready. Here we go. All right. So we begin with phonology because you will not represent in print, in orthography, what you haven't been able to analyze in speech. Right? If there's an error in how you're pronouncing it, or the co-articulation of the phonemes makes it difficult to determine individual phonemes, it's not going to show up as a grapheme. So this is the foundation. So are all the sounds represented, and are there any phonological confusions, which are typical because of the co-articulation of phonemes? All right. So let's start with the one that we'll do together. The I do kind of we do. This is the word champ. All right. That's tap sounds. Ch, ah, right? So any concerns here phonologically, yes or no? Yes, yes, right? We're missing what? We're missing the sound, that nasal sound next to a vowel. Happens a lot, especially when it's in an ending cluster, right? When we have the and the p, right? So we know we have some work to begin with phonologically before this phoneme will be represented orthographically in the word, right? Okay, so let's we're gonna, same thing. This is gonna be a think then chat. Let's look at our two little friends again, student one and student two. Do we have any concerns? Because remember, the spelling inventory goes least complex to most complex. Any problems with CVCs with either student one or student two phonologically? And just put a yes or a no in the chat.
Seeing a lot of no's.
No, so they're both looking pretty good with CVC, short vowels. We had that little reversal and nap. That's, we're going to keep an eye on that and figure out what's going on there, but not in terms of phonological concern. But that's an end of kindergarten skill, right? We're going into second grade, so we should be secure there. All right, so now we're going to look at them through blends. All right. All right, again, I'm only going to give you a short amount of time, like 30 seconds or less. Student one, student two, looking the same when it comes to phonemes and phonological awareness. And as soon as you notice strengths and weaknesses, you can put them in the chat. You can say student one this, student two that.
Both need silent E.
Well, we're just looking at blends right now.
Okay, the student two is a concern for blends. They either don't use a blend or use the incorrect one.
Mhm.
Student two has blend issues.
Yeah. So we're seeing for the most part, student one is looking pretty secure in blends, but student two, yes or no? No. Do you know what to teach is what I'm saying now. Do you know what to teach? And if you saw a lot of kids, let's say that you saw many kids in your classroom that look like student two, where would you teach that, whole group or small group?
Oh,
Whole group. If you saw just a few, whole group or small group.
small.
See, so do you see how it can inform your tiered instruction, right? So yeah, student one, blends are secured, student two, no. We know right away we need to do some phoneme graphing mapping, which is a bridge from speech to print, right? And now this is a different student, right? So I want you to look at this student and which of these words send up a red flag phonologically. And again, probably only 20 seconds because we want to get through as much as we can in the time that we have together. And I'll show you which ones concern me. Okay, ready? All of these have, now they have more than phonological errors, there's no doubt about that, but they all begin, right, with phonological errors. There's confusions, there's omissions, there's additions, there's transpositions. So if I was coding this just and looking at phonological concerns, would I have a deep concern for this student phonologically? Does it mean I would only be teaching phonological and phonemic awareness? No, right? But it would be a part of my instruction, an intensive part, and then it would be mapped to letters and meaning, right? But there's a real concern here for this student. All right. So what do? Right? We need a routine, right? Instructional routines are extremely important. They reduce the cognitive load for the teacher and the student, right? So this is a typical routine, a simultaneous oral spelling. Oftentimes you'll see a Norton Gillingham an SOS routine, right? The teacher says the word, the student says the word. They might be moving a chip or something concrete because phonemes are elusive. We say them and then they're gone. They may need a concrete representation of that phoneme. They may use their fingers to count the sounds and then they write the corresponding letters. What do you see missing in this routine?
Somebody said writing.
What we see missing too is meaning.
It's a bit, yep, meaning.
We have not bonded.
Back.
Remember that three-legged stool. Where's the meaning? Right, so this is the one that we used at Patton. And these routines, here's what I want you to notice when you see these routines. you see a lot of similarity, and that is good, right? Because they're aligned to what the evidence tells us, right? So say the word, tap out the sounds, we mop around the boxes. If we were doing CVCs, we'd never have just 3 boxes because the kids will look down and say, oh, 3, there's 3 sounds because they see 3 boxes. Oh no, you want to have more boxes and sounds, and then they map around that. They're moving down the chips, right? And then, we're mapping the sounds to the print, right? And then what do you see at the bottom? Share the meaning of the word. Don't do what our friend Anita Archer says and assume a side, even for a word like stop, that they know what it means. You're bonding in this routine. You see phonology, orthography, morphology. We have to be smarter than our programs. We have to start looking at our curriculums, our instructional routines, our instructional materials with a very critical eye. And if you're stuck with them, you gotta fix them. Right? So if I had this routine, I say, oh, this one's pretty good for mapping phonology and orthography, but boy, it's missing what? Meaning. Better add it or find a routine that has it. And then everyone uses this routine. They use the same language, the same procedures, right? Reduce the cognitive load. Our kids who are at risk have the least sameness often. The teacher does it one way, the parent does it another way. The tutor does it another way. You must have consistency. And then we say, why isn't the kid learning? It's the system that's not aligned, right? We know the sound spelling walls. It's not a sound wall, it's a sound spelling wall. We're mapping those sounds, those phonemes to graphemes, right? So if you have one, make sure you're mapping those articulatory gestures to graphemes. And if you're teaching the vowel sounds, we're going to be teaching them in a way that's systematic. We wouldn't be teaching, if I said, watch my mouth for Pete and pot, ready? Pete, pot. They both have 3 phonemes, right? But oftentimes you're not going to see kids make a spelling error between Pete and pot with a vowel sound. Why? Phonemes are sounds that are articulatory gestures. I'm feeling what's happening with my mouth. So these gestures, E, tight smiley, ah, very open round mouth, very different, right? So especially if you give them the kids mirrors, right? They're seeing what's happening with their mouth. If it's Pete and Pit, not a lot of difference, right? So systematically means I'm not teaching easily confusable things near one another, right? So be thinking about that as well. All right, so here we go on to orthography, right? So now we'll look through the lens, same kids. So we saw student 1, student 2 diverged, different phonologically, right? Same classroom. Now let's look at them orthographically, right? But let's start with one like we did with the others. Start with the word stone. Do you have a problem with this word phonologically, yes or no? Put it in the chat. No, we don't have a problem phonologically. The student is representing all the sounds and representing them in sequence. However, do we have a problem with this word orthographically, yes or no? Yes, we do, right? Especially starting 2nd grade, they've learned the VCE pattern. The student is not representing the long vowel, with a VCE pattern, right? So there's a concern orthographically here, not phonologically, right? And we see this a lot with kids with long vowels. They start using a letter name to represent a letter sound, right? It's a red flag. All right, so here we are. Let's look at our kids again, right? And we're looking at these vowel team spellings. Student 1, student 2. They look very different phonologically, same kids, same spelling inventory. What do you see now? Or alike or more different? Put it in the chat.
Both need work with vowel teams. Same concerns, same or similar.
Yes. So we saw that the kids were very different phonologically, but more what?
Alike.
Alike orthographically. What might that be telling us about instruction? What might that be telling us about curriculum? Right? In this school, we saw this pattern almost universally in second grade. So what was that telling us, right? Teachers need more support, right? And they were doing a great job. It was the era of phoneme mania. You remember that. It wasn't too long ago. And we should always have a little phoneme mania. There's no doubt about that, right? Phonemic awareness is absolutely essential, but not sufficient, right? It's one critical component of becoming a skilled reader. And what had they neglected? Orthography, right? The kids needed more practice. The teachers needed more support. And we needed to look at that curriculum, right? Because we saw it in all of them. Now, if we just saw it in a couple kids, it would be a different story. Do you see how valuable this is and how important it could be to informing what you're doing, right? So let's look at them with the VCE pattern. Again, more alike or more different. Again, with long vowel spellings. What do you see in the chat?
More alike, similar.
More alike. Yeah. So we're seeing like long vowel patterns. We have a concern. Like Houston, we have a problem, right? With vowel teams and VCE pattern. So same kids, different phonologically, more alike orthographically, right? And then here's another student. Which ones concern you orthographically? And again, I can only give you about 20 seconds because we have not enough time. Okay, and there you go. Does a student have phonological issues? No. The student's doing pretty good phonologically. Where does the student need support?
We're seeing a lot of vowel team answers.
Yeah, so a lot of orthography to work with this student, right?
Mhm.
They've got the sounds down, even in the right sequence for the most part, right? But they don't have the spellings, how to represent those sounds. All right, so again, best practices, of course, is, it's always going to come back down to like teaching it, right? Teaching it explicitly, explicit instruction on the pattern, lots of what? Practice, practice, practice. How did you get good at anything you do accurately and automatically and don't even think about? Practice and targeted word lists and sentences and text. Especially if those patterns like you can see with ray and rain or boat and bow and position, they need to be seeing those words many times in the position of that spelling so that they could orthographically map that correctly. Dictation, dictation, dictation. And of course, you were saying, where is that sound? You'd be cueing them. Is that the beginning of the word, the middle of the word, or the end of the word? How would we spell it then, right? You're cueing them in. And then we always assess on novel words, not the words that we taught them because they've memorized those, right? Right. Of course, word chains are your friend here, right? They are the bread and butter skills that every teacher should have, right? Remember, we're changing one phoneme, grapheme correspondence. That's helping students become aware of the internal structure of a word. So vitally important, right? We know that UFly also has been offering some great resources since, since forever, but during COVID, what a gift UFly and University of Florida resources and continue to be. And if you need words to focus on, Dyslexia Logic has some great letter sequences and resources for you. And of course, as I said to my friends, Rachel and Beth, my name used to be Pam Decodable Text Kastner. Now it's Pam Spelling Kastner, but Um, they should be reading and seeing these words, right? In text. An alignment between the skills that we're teaching and the practice we're giving them. We don't teach them one thing and then put them in a guided reading book that is many, many different spelling patterns, has nothing to do with what they've been taught. There's an alignment, there's cohesiveness, right? Remember, we integrate, we don't isolate, and we align. Okay, so you can see here what they're focusing on in this text so they get that repeated exposure, right? All right, so now we'll look at morphology briefly. And again, then we're looking at the meaningful parts. And again, here we can see that phonologically, the student is representing, but not morphologically yet, right? So for these examples. And we're going to look at our students again. So phonologically different, orthographically the same, morphologically, what are we seeing? So we're going to be looking at, inflectional endings here, ing, ed, es for student 1 and student 2. More alike or more different?
Student 1 is much better.
Yes. Yes. Now they're
are
back to being, isn't this fun? It's like a little mystery. It's so much fun analyzing student spelling, right?
There's a
But
question, someone just
yeah.
asking which assessment is this? Just maybe
Th-
reviewing.
That's all
This
the
is
same
from,
assessment.
it's
Yeah,
all
this
from
is,
the letters,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah, but any spelling inventory worth its salt and the ones listed, you could be doing the same thing. Yeah. National letters trainer in letters for many, many, many years. So very fortunate in that respect. All right. So what we're seeing, right, is student 1 doing okay, not perfectly, right, but needs some support with some morphemes, but student 2 much more so, right? So partially in place for student 1, endings inconsistent for student 2. Right, and then what does that mean? We'll look at another student here, and just in time's sake, I'm just going to show you the answers here. Again, the student needs some support morphologically. And so again, it's teaching it, right? And we're teaching it in scope and sequence, so least complex and most complex, beginning with those Anglo-Saxon basis and then inflectional endings. Then as they move up in the grade levels, the Latin bases and derivational suffixes and Greek combining forms. Again, teaching them reading words in targeted word lists, sentence and text, dictation, and talking about the juncture and the affixing rules. And then, as Anita Archer would say, we're teaching the relatives, right? If we're teaching submit, we'd be teaching submitting, submission, and transmit, and talking about the meaningful parts, what these parts mean, how they're spelled. Remember, morphemes have stable spellings, right? And we're unlocking meaning at the same time simultaneously. Morpheme sums are an incredible tool to engage in morphological awareness, right? We have the root form here or the base word, and then we have prefixes and suffixes, and then we're creating these sums and talking about their meaning. Kids love engaging in these kind of activities. It makes them word conscious and interested in words, right? This is a word. This is another example with the word the base penned, right, which means to hang. And another example here. So these are examples. You could have a morpheme wall in your classroom, and the kids are coming and they're building words and they're talking about how the meaning changes, right? To break, right? It's so interesting. Our language is so rich and interesting when we unveil it and uncover it for our kids, right? And morphology is a very rich way to do that, right? So you can have a morpheme wall, all right? Okay, so what do you have with you? Taylor Swift just ended her Eras tour. And I say, I never, ever, ever look at spelling without these tools, right? So phonologically, I always have the consonant chart in the valley with me, always, 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 because I'm looking for confusions, between voiced and unvoiced, or they're in close in articulation, or all those things, right? So everything the teacher needs is right here, and everything students should have is right here, right? When I have to teach phoneme grapheme mapping, common boxes and chips and kid lips and mirrors, with orthography, I have a routine for teaching words, but it better have what 3 parts? Phonology, orthography, and meaning. And I have an error correction procedure. I have decodable text, right? If I have a sound wall, it's not a sound wall, it's a sound spelling wall. And phoneme grapheme mapping, again, it's in your tool belt. And then with morphology, I have an instructional routine for teaching, decoding big words and encoding them, and the word matrices that we saw for morphology, right? Again, I mentioned the amazing Erin Amy at the beginning of this presentation. And she created these narrative examples of how you would error correct through each of these language systems. Sometimes teachers will say, like, well, what would it sound like if I was providing guidance around phonology and error correction? So these are on the Padlet for you. She was kind enough to share them. So a big shout out and thank you to her. I definitely want you to go and check those out after. As I said, I have a lot of resources on the Padlet for afterwards. So how to rescore spelling inventory. Generally, you give 1 point for a whole word spelled correctly and 1 for each of the components that's spelled correctly. So you can see that matrix across here. And then this is how this student scored. All right, so you can see to the right how many opportunities there were for that particular spelling skill and then how the student scored. But then what I did is I went in and just color coded what's been taught and not mastered yet and what has not yet been taught. Because of course you're not expecting kids to know yet what not has been taught. But as you can see, right, there's been a lot taught that this particular student has not yet learned. All right, so we're looking individually at a student. All right, so of course we're teaching it in a structured literacy framework that I showed you earlier. All the language systems integrated, don't isolate. When you're teaching spelling, you are teaching reading, right? And then we're looking for patterns across our classrooms and our grades. So very quickly, because we have 2 minutes left, let's just look at how students did in this classroom. Do we need to teach initial consonant spelling to any students in this classroom, yes or no? No. Final consonants. How we doing? Pretty good. I'm still worried about one of my students, right? Digraphs, the answer, we should have had 6 as a score, and we have 4s, 5s, 3s. Do I need to teach that? Yes. How will I teach it? Do I know right away? Yes, I do. I need to teach it how. Put it in the chat. Whole or small group?
We've got lots of people saying whole group.
That's right. Isn't that a valuable information to have to be efficient with your time? Gonna teach that whole group. What about blends? Whole group, small group.
Small, most people.
That's right. Do I know who I'm going to have at my small groups? Yes or no? Sure do. Right? What about short vowels? Whole group, small group, not at all.
Mm,
I'm gonna pick up my couple too there, but that's about it, right?
Yeah.
What about long vowels? Whole group, small group, not at all. Put it in the chat.
Whole.
See, do you understand what you're seeing here?
Yeah, this is great.
So what I shared with you in the second part was really what I want you to, that was kind of like an I do, we do, please, you do, go back and do it where you are. Be a spelling obsessed person like me. All right. So just summary here, references here. This is how people, I did spelling training, I don't know, a little while ago, and a teacher from San Francisco reached out and said, I don't know how to analyze I said, we'll just do a Zoom and we'll do it together. Like, so always, if you have questions, always feel free to reach out. I love teaching. I think you could probably tell, right? So you could always reach out if you have questions. I'm obsessed with my family and literacy. So if you follow me on Twitter or Blue Sky or any of those places or social media, you'll see lots of stuff on literacy.